Okay, good. I think we're live. Saleha Islam alaikum, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for tuning in. Please do make sure that you. I'm just trying to get myself sorted out here. Please make sure that you do comment and say hello, because otherwise we don't know if you're watching or not. But I'm trying out this new technology, and so far so good. So it all seems to be going very well. So I just want to say a big thank you and welcome. Oh, Isabella is here, thank God. So we are live. And we do know that
That's good.
we know that it's working. So I just want to thank you, Saleha, for agreeing to do this actually at very short notice. So that's even more of a blessing. And so I really am appreciative of that. And you and I have known each other for a number of years now. And I'll always remember the first time we met was when we were on a panel together. I can't remember when it was exactly, but it was a number of years ago. And all I remember, or the main thing I remember from that, was the fact that we clicked, and everything you were saying, I found myself totally in agreement, which doesn't always happen, of course. And I thought, wow, she's one I need to meet. So, and you've been in my life ever since. So I feel very lucky for that. So what I would love you to do, so I won't introduce you, you introduce yourself, and please just give us a set the scene so that we know who you are, your background, a bit about you, and where are you speaking to us from. So just give us a sort of Saleha set the scene if you can. Bismillah.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everybody, and I'm delighted to be here, Julie. The same ditto. The time that I saw you, I was nodding away, and actually we had on the same dresses.
Oh,
you may not remember, but we had on the same dresses. Yeah, we had on the same dresses, and they were from Wallace, by the way. And
okay, cool.
it was at the Association of Police Officers, and it was.
You've got a better memory than me.
I remember it. Yeah, I remember very clearly. So anyhow, so I'm live from Fulham in London. I've lived in Fulham for the majority of my life. I was born in Bedfordshire, and by the time I was 1, my father moved to London, and we grew up in Victoria until I was about 13, and the rest of my life I've lived in Fulham. So I've always lived in central London, and I love being here. I'm married. I've got 4 daughters. Wow. The youngest one is just about to she's about to finish university, hopefully. She had a little bit of an extension because somebody passed away in my family not long ago, so we needed to kind of get over that. And I have 1 grandson and another one on their way. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Very soon. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. 4 girls, and I'm part of 3 sisters.
Beyond that, so you were born in Bedfordshire. What's your background in terms of family background?
Oh, okay, yes. So basically, we're Bangladeshi, but when my mum came here, of course, it was East Pakistan, and when my dad was here, it was India, because my dad came in 1945.
Oh wow!
Yes, so he was in the Second World War. He was in the Navy, as were quite a lot of, I think. People from that part of the world, actually. And my mum came like in the 60s, and then I was born after that. So my mum was one of the very few women, I think, that came here. And she's nearly 80 now, and I try to kind of get glimpses of what her life was like. And that's really interesting. I think that our elders are leaving us very quickly, and I want to kind of capture some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I feel it as well, even though when I see people around me, and every time someone says it, I think it is an urgent thing to do. That first generation of migrants from that background that came here, I think the women in particular, but maybe I would say that, but I just think there's something so powerful about their stories, and I'm not really sure, particularly for the women's stories, I'm not really sure they've been told enough,
No, they haven't.
I'm always reminded of that when I speak to someone, and I think you're absolutely right. They need to be you know, we need to get good at documenting this stuff, because what they did was amazing, the way they managed and came here. Assalamu alaikum, Husna. Husna's online. This is lovely, isn't it? Anyway.
Nice. I can't see who's online, so I don't know.
Oh, you can't see the comments.
I'm just looking at you, Julie. That's it.
Okay, yeah, you carry on. That's fine.
No.
Okay, so Saleha, give us a bit of a snapshot, a background now. Go back to your career. You know, you've done such an amazing and I would say difficult work. So give us an idea of where did that start? What was that kind of the inroads into that? And then give us an idea of that.
I think
Rizwana, Aksa.
It's you know, alhamdulillah, I think, alhamdulillah, I think I've been really blessed in terms of like, I've never had a mentor per se, and it was like, well, where do I go? What happens and whatever. And I think, you know, some guidance came in front and I would go for things. So basically, I think I've always been interested in justice, in social justice. And I volunteered from a very young age, from about the age of 15. I was part of something called the CRE, which is like, you know, it's like kind of race relations kind of type thing. And I worked with a family and with social services of a young girl who was sexually abused. And she wanted to have an abortion, couldn't, and ended up having the baby, and it was adopted. And I was part of that kind of like interpreting for the family and the social worker. And I, for the first time in my life, I realized what was going on. This girl was only a little bit younger than me, and she was going through all of this, and the parents, and how difficult it was for them. And I thought, you know what, this is really interesting. I mean, because everybody had to come in, you know, become involved and help this woman. Now, my father, he wanted me to be a doctor, as usual, you know, the whole doctor lawyer thing. And in those days, basically, unless you had somebody in your family who was a doctor, you're not going to become one. I faced a lot of discrimination in school, a lot. I was the only brown face in a primary school in Victoria. I went to something called Burdett Coots C of E school, and even the secondary school. So basically, there was lots of stuff happening there, quite traumatic sometimes in terms of like how I had to kind of survive through all of that, and expectations of my parents that I should be very educated and try and do amazingly well, despite the fact that, you know, they hadn't done much themselves or didn't understand. So anyhow, that situation, when I worked with that family, it really made me think, oh, this is really interesting. I want to help others maybe through this way. And I became interested like in social work. And I originally kind of went into that work. I had this huge title. I worked for Westminster Social Services, and I was the social services officer for the Asian community. And there was like for about 50,000 people. In those days, in the 80s, you had titles like that. One person to represent literally like 500,000 people, which was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it allowed me to do so many things. It allowed me to kind of like work in, you know, in the hospitals, in the social service offices, health visitor, police, everything. I was like, you know, I'd get a chance and opportunity to do that. So anyhow, and before that, I worked in the Royal London Hospital in East London, and I was the interpreter there for a year. And I realized, you know what, I'm either going to become a social worker or a midwife. And I chose social work, went to Westminster, did that work for about 4.5 years. And then many people were saying things like, oh, you know, you're not qualified. You're not qualified to do this sort of work. And I'm like, but I'm giving you reports. I'm doing things, you know, X, Y, and Z, and it's absolutely perfectly well. And my father said to me, you know, he said, it's very important that other people don't take credit for what you do. Go and get qualified. So even though as an Asian person, I was in a really good job, pretty good salary, you know, the whole thing around, you had good izzat, working where I was, I decided, you know what, I have to go and study. So I went to university and did my social work. But then I also realized that I was really interested, the whole thing still about people. So I ended up becoming a therapist. So I did psychotherapy, I did family therapy, Islamic counseling, solution focus. I did lots and lots of things to basically develop who I was so that I can help others. That was really important for me. I mean, I've done over the last 30 years, I have done so many different things, but to kind of like summarize it, I decided that after a few years of working with people that I needed to go into management because there's only so much that you can do on the ground level. If you're not where you need to be in terms of like us as women, as Muslim women, as brown women, then you can't change things just by being on the ground. It took me a while to realize that I had to basically do something different. And so I ended up like applying for manager jobs, and eventually I ended up becoming head of a organization that dealt with disadvantaged families in Kensington and Chelsea. And at the same time, they were building a mosque in Kensington and Chelsea, and they were looking for women trustees. Now, this mosque is Al Manar. So majority of you will know Al Manar. So this was in the early 1990s. And for me, when they came and said, look, you're very accomplished, you've done X, Y, and Z. We'd like you to be a trustee. And I'm like, really? You know, what? I didn't understand anything about why a woman would need to be a trustee. Now, people might be thinking, wow, you know, we want to be trustees nowadays. But at that time, it was like, well, you know, what can I add? I had no idea of what they were trying to do. But after they spoke to me for several months, I said, okay, this sounds really interesting, because it was the Medinic model. It was more like a community center than just a mosque. And so I said, okay. So I worked in the trustee board before they even set it up, before, you know, it was just rubble in that area. And I did it for 16 years.
Wow. You know, it's good that you mentioned it. I forgot. I knew that you did, but I'd completely forgotten. I was thinking about all of your other stuff, so much of it, but I forgot about that. And actually, it's fair to say it's one of the only, I mean, there are others, of course, mosques that have women on boards, but it's not very common. I think that particular one, am I right in thinking the local authority were kind of involved as well in terms of the...
Yeah, but not because of the women. They weren't. I mean, the whole thing was that because the people behind it. So there was a really amazing guy who worked in again the kind of race relations council in the borough in Kensington, and he was a very learned man, and he said, look, both male and female need to be part of this. And they did start out with like 3 or 4 women, but sometimes the reality is it's really hard to be a trustee. In those days, meetings were in the evenings. You know, you had to stay for like several hours. You had to do lots of different meetings as well, because we were building the actual center. And I stuck it through. I'm one of those people, I will stick through things. I will complete them. That's something that I have. And I'm not in it just because, oh, it's my name on a piece of paper and I'm this. I don't believe in that. I really don't believe in that. So yeah, there was a lot of learning, and I eventually ended up becoming the director there just before the Grenfell fire, which was different because it was a paid role. And I believe that there were changes made that only a woman could have done. Only a woman could have done. And that's also because of the fact that I was born and raised in this country. And I'm going to be kind of like explicit and say that I wasn't an Arab man with a beard. You know, I'll tell you, when the Paris bombings happened, we had about 50 different news outlets outside of the door, and they were all looking for a man with a beard. to talk to as the center director. I was
Mhm.
walking up and down the corridor, going in and out, and they had no idea that it was me.
Mhm.
So that I was laughing. I'd go into my room, and I was like, they have no idea. They must be either thinking that I'm a receptionist, or I don't know, somebody. But they had, they were looking for somebody with a very thick accent
Mhm.
who was going to basically greet them and talk to them.
Mm.
So I mean, things like that for me are kind of quite funny when I remember them.
Mm.
But also, it's really important. I think that's why that women and men come together
Mhm.
to deliver services in our masjids. And I
Mm.
really hope that that can change. And hopefully we get the right people involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other topic for another day, perhaps. And in fact, next week, this time next week, there's a brilliant event happening online from Scotland. So I'm not going to do one of these next week. I'm going to watch that and hope other people do too. But I'm going to post about that. This is all about mosques in the past, present, and future. It's a brilliant session that they've got planned from Scotland online next week. Anyway, I want to just go back a minute. You mentioned it quite briefly, but the fact that you mentioned it, I think, was is quite interesting. You mentioned that at school you faced essentially injustice or racism or bad treatment from other kids. Do you think that shaped, the fact that you mentioned it makes me think that you feel it shaped what you went
Yeah,
on to do?
yeah, I think it was quite traumatic because the thing is that my parents really didn't understand, what was
Mm-hmm.
going on. They hadn't faced anything like that.
Mm.
But for me, it was like I was really I was on my own. I'm the eldest in the family.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do? I really didn't know. There was no kind of anti-bullying.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically you had to really sort yourself out. I mean, I ended up fighting with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing is that I grew up. I was very tall in primary school,
Mm-hmm.
so basically I'd end up having fights with the boys, and for the first time, I was called the P word.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what does that mean? I didn't even know what it meant, Julie. I was
Mm-hmm.
just so kind of, I hadn't grown up with kind of people to understand that, I was so different. Yes, I was brown, but I felt as though, I liked the same bands, music. Islam was there, but it wasn't the most important thing in our lives. You're just growing up, you're a child,
Mm-hmm.
you've got friends. So to actually then end up being um, taunted,
Mm-hmm.
beaten up, although I don't think I was beaten up. I beat them up. All of that was really terrible. And in fact, when we were in secondary school, we had such a big fight that we had to leave the school because a girl was stabbed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how profound,
Mm.
the bullying happened. And in those days, very few teachers would help. In those days, actually, if it happened outside of the school, they took no responsibility. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to literally kind of like become strong. I had to become strong. It was like, this was about justice. This was about, I'm not going to be beaten down.
Mm. So you went on then to, by the way, can you see the comment? I've just put it up there. Can you see it?
What?
Saleha, can you
Oh,
see there's a comment
fascinating.
there?
What, Charlie?
Yeah, so that's Rabbi Charlie from last week. She did this.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's very nice. So she said,
Oh, thank
fascinating
you.
discussion, finding it really inspiring. And Rami said, great discussion. And Rizwana said her school life was similar to what you're saying as well. So she
Oh,
relates to
she
that. So
understand. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And even
So
the
you went
teachers,
on
like,
to
yeah.
go on, carry on, go on.
No, I was just saying that the teachers, they didn't really kind of put much effort into me either.
Mm-hmm.
That was the
Mm-hmm.
thing, is that, I was a really good student. I was a really good student. And in those days we had, what was it? O levels and it was O levels and CSEs.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, do the CSEs in case you don't get the O level. And I said, no, I'm going to do the O level, even if I don't get as good a grade.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no one to come and talk on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
My dad
So you've
went.
always been strong in that sense then, always been strong-willed and strong-minded, it seems to me. Did you go on then to qualify as a social worker, or did you take the
Yes.
psychotherapy route? I know you worked at the
Yeah.
NSPCC at one point.
Yeah.
What did you do after you graduated and stuff?
So basically, like I said, I've done like lots of further training. I ended up becoming a solution-focused psychotherapist. I did Islamic counseling. I've done NLP, hypnotherapy, energy healing. I could give a whole long list. And also, I did my postgraduate in management as well as my social work. And what I realized, and maybe because of the time that I was growing up, that basically it was important to actually get qualified, because at the end of the day, even if you were fantastic, somebody could turn around and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not going to listen to you because you're not X or you're not Y. And it may not happen, because a lot of people will say, oh, you don't have to be qualified nowadays, you know, you could just do something or whatever. But for me in those days, it was. I think I was probably just a handful when I qualified 30 odd years ago as a social worker. Maybe there was another 2 or 3 people in the country, you know, because it wasn't something that people realized, but there was a huge need, and there still is a need. For people who are also bilingual.
Did you work? Obviously, you talked about the translating stuff, and that made you sort of appreciate and realize what was going on in the families as well.
Yeah, so I worked for 4 years in Westminster as a social worker, kind of like what we called something called Section 17, which the government brought in to bring in people from different minorities to actually show them, you know, talk about social work and get them to actually do the social work. So once I did that, I ended up doing a lot of the work, and then I qualified. Once I qualified, I did statutory work. I worked across London. I worked in Camden, Westminster again, Kensington, Chelsea. I worked in different locations. And then I went on to work for 7 years at the NSPCC. I was the child protection manager for the Asian community. Again, a huge title, but actually getting out the whole issue around child protection, child abuse, especially sexual abuse. And there was research done, and I remember going on BBC News. I think it was like 6 o'clock or something. I was interviewed, and right after me, Tony Blair came on, and everybody in the media room was just like erupting in joy. And I was like, what's the big deal? They said, do you know how big that is for the NSPCC to get their kind of like news coverage? And I thought, oh, really? Okay. So I again, it was like, it was something so important about the whole thing around our community and the abuse that was going on, because nobody was talking about it.
So that was what, in the 90s?
Yeah, so that basically covered kind of like some of the 90s, and then
the 2000s.
And then in between that, remember, so I'm working, but I'm also doing voluntary work. So I'm at Almanar. I've got like 2 children. My husband is driving me here, there, and everywhere, the poor thing, because I don't drive. So
you just drive him crazy, really, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm driving crazy. Yeah. And so
that was in the 90s. And you, I just wondered, I'd be interested to know, because you're still, you know, I mean, people are probably tired even listening to all of the things that you've done. It's amazing. And, you know, tired meaning exhausted just hearing it is what I mean. But what I wonder was, not tired of hearing you, but what I wonder is, so from your sort of experiences in the 90s, when you're saying that people weren't talking about things, and to now, what has shifted? You know, do you think that Asian and other communities are talking about things more? Is it still being brushed under the carpet too much? I mean, I know what I think, but I would be interested to know what from your professional perspective.
So basically, you know, I just to kind of fill in a bit of the background. So I ended up coming from, I ended up being the chief executive of Muslim Youth Helpline. I worked with Yusuf Islam's Maqam Center. I did Al-Manar. I also worked for another charity, which I'm not going to name, as the London director. I ended up doing lots and lots of work, basically. And also I worked for Sept, which is the Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre, which was catching paedophiles across the world.
Yeah.
Now, as part of that, since COVID, what I've realized is that people in all communities are going through a really difficult time with mental health issues. And I don't mean like just schizophrenia or bipolar, but just generally people are depressed, people are feeling down, they don't know what's going to happen. You know, unfortunately, some of the news makes people feel kind of quite terrorized, actually. And so that work has now taken over. Now, if you're already suffering, so if there's abuse going on, and on top of that, you've got COVID and you're in the house, it's just exploding. I'm telling you honestly, there's a lot going on, and people still find it difficult to talk about. They still find it difficult to express themselves because they wait until it's too late. People need to realize that, you know, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, we just think that, oh my God, you know, I can't tell anybody that I'm going through something. But the thing is, you know, if you need help, you just need to say it. You need to actually get help. I've done it myself. I mean, like, you know, when you're working with people, I too need help because basically I can get overwhelmed. And I think I was telling you the other day that, you know, I'm doing some voluntary work, I do paid work, and some of the voluntary work is just overwhelming. And I just have to say, you know what, I have to stop.
Yeah.
So there is a need.
Let me pick that up in a minute, just to say that the thing about you know, I just am interested to know whether you think things have shifted. So you're right, obviously, about mental health, and people are much more aware of it now, it seems, across the board, but still there's so much to do in terms of things around abuse and sort of stuff that's hushed up. Where are we at with that? So let's talk about Muslim communities or Asian communities, the kind of the experiences that you've had in the work that you've done at a professional level, voluntary, etc. Has the shift happened? Are we still in the state that we're in, where people are still shoving things under the carpet and not wanting to talk about it?
It's really interesting. I think it's not just one, there's several strands. So on one level, people are more aware of what the issues are, of what abuse is. And people are very willing to listen to other people to help and support them. If it happens on their own doorstep, that's another matter. You know, like if one of their daughters is sexually abused or raped, or their son does something, what happens then? That's the thing. Is that then, you know, do people go to the police? Do they get support and help? We're very good at helping others, but if it's about us, it's a different matter. In fact, I had a discussion with a group of brothers actually that I'm working with, and I mentioned that. I said, look, you know, if some sort of abuse happens to a girl, would you be willing for that to marry that girl, or actually to even make that person your daughter-in-law? And alhamdulillah, they said the right thing. They said, yes, you know, it's not her fault. And I said, that's wonderful to hear. But will it be a reality? Because, you know, it's the woman that suffers. You know, she's the one who will suffer, and the man will get away. I do believe that, you know, it's not for all men. I think some men are realizing what's going on, but there's a lot of work that we need to do. I mean, if you think about it, organizations like the NSPCC have been around for 100 years.
Yeah.
Okay. But we as a community are only understanding this maybe for about 20 odd years, maybe a little bit more. And different parts of our community will learn things differently. And it's a very, very sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive topic. So a lot more work needs to be done. Yeah,
so Rizwana just called you a superwoman, and then mentioned about the very difficult subject around through lockdown, when, you know, there were so many domestic abuse incidents, the numbers went up. My niece is a policewoman, and said as well that so much of what they've had to deal with has been domestic abuse related. it's really scary when you think about that and how it must be so awful for some people. It's good to remember that, you know, while many of us feel that we've benefited in some ways, but those people that are living in that kind of environment, I mean, I just can't imagine what it must be like to be trapped like that. So that's something. It's good to. I mean, it must be horrendous. But so let's just touch a bit on the Muslim community sort of scene and where we're at. So you're still very much involved, you know, and you've kept going, and you've done your professional stuff and brought that into the community and done what you can. You know, where would you say we're at in terms of, you know, the scene really? You mentioned just now about working with a charity, and you didn't mention it, and that's fine. You know, we've seen a number of sort of Muslim charities kind of unravel before our eyes, it seems, in terms of issues around governance and safeguarding issues and things like that. Where do you know, from your sort of professional viewpoint, where are we at with it? You can be as honest as you need to be.
Okay, all right. So listen, I'm also a safeguarding consultant, and I've done some international work around it over the last couple of years, actually. And because of the nature of confidentiality, I can't talk about it, but I am concerned about some of our charities because on paper, everything might look fine, but actually, especially abroad, you know, the things happen that aren't right. So I went in to check an orphanage where women and children were being sexually abused and harassed by the owners. And, you know, I had to do this kind of full audit and everything. I mean, the charity was very, you know, was very supportive. But the thing is, when you began to look at everything, you realize that there were gaps. And I've always said this, and I think many of the people who are listening here will know that it's all very well having, you know, paper files and all the policies and procedures, but it's actually what actually happens on the ground. You know, what actually happens on the ground, what is going on. And I think that a lot of the charities grow very quickly, as in like financially, but they don't have the right staff, the right people to actually carry out the work. So they're going like that, you know, so many million, but they only had like, you know, a man and a dog at the beginning, and then suddenly they bring in their friends and who else and who else. And then they begin to bring in people, but then you have to let people do the work that they know. You know, I'm at the stage when I'm not going to be micromanaged. I'm sorry, I'm not. You know, I can come in and I can do something and I can do it incredibly well, but don't come and look over my shoulder all the time. If you're paying me an amount of money, and I think that's what sometimes happens, is some people can't let go of what's going on. Now, when you talk about I think that we're going through a time where change is happening. Change happens all the time. But, you know, I think people are tired and fed up, and we want more change. But I think that this also has to be more serious conversations. There are people out there, good men, that we need to talk to, and we need to say, look, we need to feel we belong. I mean, you know, we need to have spaces. We need to feel that things are transparent, that, you know, we often feel that people bring over their kind of values or kind of issues from abroad, whether it's Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, or Arab, or, you know, Arabic countries or whatever. But people that are born and brought up here, we have a way of doing things, and that needs to kind of, we need to influence that even more. You know, people need to be in positions, bring in your expertise. And that's what I did with the Muslim community. I worked in the non-Muslim community for over 20 years. I want to come in and share what I know. And it was hard.
Is that well received? Or yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I always get the impression when we have conversations about this that your professional, you know, wealth of experience out there is just not appreciated enough in, say, a Muslim charity or an organization. I feel like they're almost like a mismatch. I mean, you certainly don't need to be micromanaged. I mean, who can micromanage you when you're bringing so much experience to the table? I mean, I find it, you know, it's quite insulting sometimes, I think, when people are doing that. I mean, I really find that quite, it's almost like, well, you're bringing so much into the room. Is that well received, or is it often seen as threatening, or how is it? And is there a gender element to it or not?
I think there's a gender element to it. Like, I've earned people's respect. I have, because of the work that I've done. And I remember talking to you about people like me. We clean the oven, as in, like, basically we do the things that other people don't do.
And that oven analogy was honestly brilliant. Let me just make you say it properly.
Okay.
But honestly, I can't explain it. When you said it to me, I found it funny and just brilliant because I just spent probably a couple of hours doing my oven that very week. But I think it was really appropriate and, really good that you mentioned it because it's so true. So just explain what you mean. I know what I took from it, but what do you mean women clean the ovens? Not just me actually cleaning my oven. It's much of more of a broad point there.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was basically that, as head of an organization, when I go in, I try and sort out everything. And a lot of people won't see the things that I've done.
Yeah.
They want to see, like, it's like, you want to see the outside, it's shiny, it's fine. But I'm going to open up the door and I'm going to clean everything. That's what I do. So you can take it however you want it, but that's, it's the difficult work. It's the things that people don't appreciate. It's things that people leave and are actually really important and vital. Those are the things that I think as a woman we do. And sometimes it's not seen, sometimes it's not appreciated, but I know I've done it and Allah knows that I've done it.
And it feels good when you open the door after you've done
it. Yeah, lovely lemony fresh smell.
So listen, you mentioned just now, I mean, there's so many things that are going around in my mind that I could ask you, but you mentioned just now about looking after yourself. And, people have obviously realizing even from this brief half an hour chat that you've done so much, and so much of it has been difficult stuff. And that takes its toll on all of us. How do you protect yourself from that? How do you look after yourself? What do you do to make sure, because to have to help, you've been helping people for 30 or more years, literally, so many deep, difficult things that you've seen and heard and all of that. That must have taken a toll. I mean, how do you manage that?
Yeah, it has. And in fact, I have had several different health issues over the years because there's been a lot of stress involved. And I think especially when you do social work, it's incredibly stressful. And I don't think people understand how stressful it is. All people think is that, someone's gone in and removed the children from the parents. But there's just so much that goes on. And for someone to make that decision, and you don't make it up on your own, but to actually go through those processes can be incredibly hard. And I basically have had some health issues. So what I always used to do though is to basically treat myself. So I'd always have things like a massage, I'd have reflexology. I love that. And in fact, today my daughter surprised me and took me out for a lovely facial, which was really, really nice. So I think it's important that as women we pamper ourselves, because it's like an MOT. I used to say my MOT is my reflexology, my massage, and whatever else I need. It's my 6-month MOT or whatever, or I'll have a weekly something. And I do think it's important because I gave so much, I needed to give something back to me. I can't run on empty. I have to kind of fill myself up. And I think that sometimes women forget to do that. Like it's everyone else except us. And I have to remind myself that, no, I have to also look after myself. So I do that.
And you and I were speaking recently about the importance of having good friends around, which seems obvious, but actually I think that's also really important. Having good people around us that can nurture us and help us thrive is what I would say. I think that is something really important, and women can really benefit from this. I mean, men can too, but
Yeah.
And there's an interesting comment here. Charlie, Rabbi Charlie, who was on last week, who's kindly watching, said, so the book that we're writing on female leadership, subtitled as "This Is Our Time," now has a title, "The Women Who Clean Ovens," because she liked the analogy. So she and I were talking about how, you know, this is our time as women leaders, and we've been through a lot and will continue, and things will not be perfect, but actually there's something to be said for the way women lead and do things, and together women of different faiths, different backgrounds, doing different things can actually do a lot of good stuff together. I definitely really believe in that.
Yeah, I think this is the time of introspection, the time of wisdom, of women's wisdom to come through. You know, I am somewhere where I wasn't before in 20, 30 odd years ago. I wasn't in the place that I am now. I feel very grounded. I feel solid in my knowledge, what I want to do. I'm very clear about that, and I'm very clear in terms of my spiritual strength, etc. So, but I absolutely believe, you know, and this is, I've always kind of missed that kind of sisterhood, because a lot of people that I have as friends, they're busy as well, or they've moved abroad, and that can be really difficult.
Yeah.
You know, when I grew up, all my friends were English, and then as soon as I didn't start going out with boys and all of that, I lost that kind of change. It shifted because I wasn't doing that. And so,
but that's why we're here, right? And that's one of the things that Thrive is about.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, and if COVID wasn't around, I'd be like, Julie, where are we going away?
No, we will be. But for anyone who's watching, who's interested, so Together We Thrive is a sort of overall something I've set up, but one of the really important parts of it, bringing Muslim women in particular together to build these friendships, to support each other, because I've seen over the years that, yes, you know, many people have that, but a lot of people don't have that support. And, you know, the friendship element and the sort of, you know, lifting each other up and, you know, opening doors and sharing our contacts and all that kind of stuff. I think there's so much exciting stuff that we can do. You know, that's one thing. So anybody who's interested, please message me, or, you know, look up Together We Thrive, message through the website, because I think there's some really brilliant, I'm you know, very excited about some of the ideas there. So listen, Saleha, we could talk for England. I knew that this would happen, and we could go on, and having conversation with amazing women is honestly just such a privilege for me, because it gives me energy. And, you know, when people ask me what keeps you going, it's this kind of stuff that actually keeps me going.
So much. Really, You're very kind. You're very kind.
And, you know, I pray that our friendship continues. So I'm going to go on to my 5 in 5 now. 5 questions. I'm not going to ask you anything. I'm going to resist the temptation to dig in deeper or ask you stuff, just to give people who are watching now or afterwards just a snapshot of Saleha, maybe stuff that you haven't spoken about already, that maybe you never get asked. And so I thought I would ask you. So I've got the same 5 questions that I ask everyone. So are you ready?
Yes. Okay.
Are you ready? The first one is like 2 questions in one, but a favorite food and a favorite place in the world.
Okay, so my favorite food has to be curries.
Okay.
I'd be letting the team down, because, you know, so yeah, it has to be curries, and all different types of curries. I love that. And savory food, I love savory food. So yeah. And in terms of place, I built a beautiful villa in Bangladesh in the early 90s. And it was my desire that, you know, kind of like as the kids get older, that I'd kind of spend some time there and some time here. And I've planted organic fruit and vegetables. I've got mangoes and big jackfruit and pineapples, so many things. I can have coconut water every day. So it's like my little place on earth. And I wish that I could be there now, but it's not possible because of COVID.
Well, I mean, you've kept that quiet. That's all I'll say. So
if you want to do a private meeting there.
What do you mean?
That's what I wanted to do. You can all come down. Yeah. You'll love it. Yeah. You'll love it.
Oh my God. Anyway, I'm going to park that. But that is well and truly, that sounds amazing.
Good.
Absolutely amazing. I thought you were almost like talking about a dream, not an actual real thing there.
No,
Anyway,
it's
gosh,
happened.
that sounds
Great.
amazing. We'll definitely go there one day, inshallah, God willing.
So,
What about a favorite quote or saying?
well, my favorite quote, it's from Rumi's. There's a number of Rumi's quotes, and I'll just read it to you briefly. It's the one, it says, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again. Come, come."
Yeah, I love that too. Amazing.
Yeah.
It says all of what it needs to say, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's pray that we can all have that approach to others.
Amen.
What lesson or advice would you give the younger Saleha?
Yeah, that was a difficult one, you know. I think I would say that, look, you don't know the future. Things will change for the better. You will do the most amazing things that you could never have even thought of. You know, because there were times when I was like really, really like scared. I was like, you know, what am I going to do? Whatever. So the fact that to be able to say that things will work out, Allah has your back, you know, you have people who are looking after you, things will be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very powerful and very probably a very popular one amongst women in particular, because we over worried when we were younger about what we were like. And anyway, let's not talk about it. I'm going to resist the temptation. A favorite verse from the Quran or a hadith? Obviously, there are many.
Yeah, there's so many, but this one has been part of my life and is still part of my life, and from an external point of view and an internal point of view. So it's, you know, like from Arad, Allah will not change the condition of a people unless they change what is in themselves. And I see that both as a community, but also internally from a psychological perspective. So I see so many clients and they want me to heal them, or they want me to change them. I'm like, no, I'm going to, you know the answer. I'm going to help you to change, but you have to do the work. You know, it's not like a, you know, a magic wand. But also with the community, sometimes, you know, we can say the right things, but we're not doing the right things. And I've seen it, and it's, the more I reflect on it, the more I realize there's so much depth in it and truth in it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that reminder. It's really very, very powerful, as you say. And lastly, what or who do you need in your life to thrive?
I need laughter.
Thrive. Do you? You need laughter.
Yeah. I need laughter. I you know, laughter is really important. Love is really important in my family. You know, at one stage in my life, I didn't think I was actually going to be a mum. I wasn't sure if I wanted to have any kids. And I'm delighted that I have 4.
And grandchild, another one on the way.
And he is, yeah. And I love that. You know, I just was like so focused on changing, you know, the world. And I thought, you know, I haven't got time to do all of this, but Allah had different plans for me. So yeah, I love that, you know, and my family is really, really important for me. They keep me sane, they keep me grounded. You know, don't get a big head, do this, do that, mum, you know, don't do this. Yeah, my husband is a good man and he makes me laugh. So
perfect.
I'm very pleased about that.
Well, listen, that, you know, we could talk a lot more. I think you've shared very, you know, brilliant insight, and your authenticity and professionalism, and, you know, your sincerity, and, you know, God consciousness, all of that has come out so well in the last, whatever it is, 45 or so minutes. It's an absolute blessing, honestly, to be your friend. And I think that people have had just an insight. I urge people to connect with Saleha in whatever way they can. Clearly, the idea of us going to your villa in Bangladesh is very, very popular. and Hasna and Charlie and Rizwana and everyone. You know, you might regret mentioning that because that's
no,
gone down.
I'm very happy. That was one of my thinking, actually, because I was thinking if I'm going to be 6 months over there, I want people to come. And in fact, one of my friends from years ago, she did come and she stayed with me.
Well,
and she said,
Saleha,
Saleha, this is amazing. You're
done,
all invited.
right?
You're invited.
I'm honestly, I can't even tell you how exciting it is. I can't believe you just kept that one so quiet. Anyway, so we're all coming, and it's on the record, as Isabella just said. It's on the record, so it's, you know, I'm going to hold you to this one now. But honestly, may Allah bless you, your family. I pray that your new grandchild is well and healthy, and I can't wait to see the pictures. And so, you know, and keep doing what you're doing. It's been, honestly, you've done so much for so many people. I know that over the years, much of which you'll probably never know, those families that you've helped with translating and social work and all of that difficult stuff that we, you know, most of us would run away from. You've kept in the thick of it, and you've brought that into the Muslim community. And, you know, we have a lot to thank you for in that sense, really. So I pray that you have much life left, and we can enjoy this next part of our lives together, inshallah, in your lovely villa, sipping coconut water. And back there. Thank you so much, Saleha. May Allah bless you. Take care.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for watching, and people watching on the playback. And, you know, it's a very, very simple but very meaningful conversations that we're having with amazing women, different backgrounds, different things that they can chip in. And I'm hoping that it's helping people to, you know, frame their own ideas or think about themselves and their own lives. And, you know, it's just a really real honor to speak to people like Saleha and Charlie and Hind at the beginning. And inshallah, we'll carry on. I'm not going to do one next week. I mentioned at the beginning, there's a brilliant session happening at the same time next week. So I'd rather people watch that, which is all about mosques in the past, the present, and the future. I'll post up some information about that. But these are really important issues as well, of course. So I'd rather people watch that than watch me talking to another amazing person. I'll do one, hopefully, inshallah, the week after. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Keep well, keep safe. Assalamu alaikum.